Good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well today. We've got another prediction video here, another attempt to take a guess at how players on the Seahawks are going to do. And we are continuing on with the defense, and this time it's the edge rushers. A collection of players on this team, and it's not a big collection. I'm only looking at 5 different guys in this video because as of right now, I can only assume that there are going to be 5 guys that contribute to this defense as edge rushers. Uh, Primarily, anyway. You are going to have guys like Draymond Jones occasionally line up as edge. You might see a little bit of Jamal Adams at edge. You might see a little bit of another kind of weird random player at edge. Maybe Bobby gets a play or two at edge. I don't know. But it's going to be mainly these 5 guys in this video. And I'm going to take a guess at how they're going to perform. Now, this is a crop of guys that I feel pretty good about. Not amazing yet, but we're headed in the right direction with this edge group. And we've got, you take a look at our guys. We've got a second-year player who I think is due for a big breakout season. We've got a rookie, a second-round rookie that is expected to do something. You've got a guy in the prime of his career in a contract year. And you've also got a guy who is trying to prove that he still belongs in this league after basically not doing anything for 2 years. Going to be kind of interesting to see what he can put together. And you've also got kind of maybe the most polarizing player on this defense outside of Jamal Adams. So it's an interesting crew of guys. Overall, it seems very likely we're going to get solid contributions out of this group. If they can stay healthy, then I think there's every reason to believe we're going to get really good stuff out of the edge crop. Now, again, we're going to take a look at some box score stats here. Box score stats are not going to tell you the whole picture with these guys. They don't really do it with any guys, but they're not going to do it with these guys either. So I do believe that there is going to be part of the story that needs to be told by just watching them play and evaluating how good the defense is overall. But for these 4 guys, we're going to do tackles, tackles for loss, sacks, and pressures. Pretty nice and easy. And at the end of the day, they're edge rushers. Their job is to disrupt the quarterback and make plays in the backfield. So this is a lot of the job. They are going to occasionally drop into coverage, but that's going to be a relatively small part of their game compared to what they actually do in terms of going after the football. So, with that being said, let's take a look at these 5 guys that I think are going to get pretty much all of the work as edge rushers this year and see how I think they are going to do in 2023 for the Seahawks. Of course, the top guy is Uchenna Nwosu. Every reason to believe that he is still the best edge player on this team. I do think his numbers will go down a little bit this year because we won't play him as much. Last year, we put a lot on Uchenna because he was the only edge rusher that we had full faith in. Darrell Taylor was one-dimensional. Mafe was a rookie. Alton Robinson never got on the field. It was kind of tough at times. It was difficult for us to manage not having Nwosu on the field at all times. This year, I don't think that'll be the case as much. So I went with 58 tackles. I don't think he's going to get as many as he had last year because there will be fewer snaps. I think he'll probably be about as good, maybe even a little bit better on a per-snap basis, but the massive volume won't be quite there. Tackles for loss, I went with 10. Should make a decent number of plays in the backfield. He's good against the run, too. We know that about him, so should be making plays against the run. Sacks, I went with 9. He had 9.5 last year. So again, it's just kind of a product of him getting to play a little bit less, although that should make him a little more effective when he does play. So I think it's a worthy trade-off all day. He's still going to be playing most of the snaps. He's still our best edge rusher, I think, pretty hands down. And total pressures, again, PFR 25. If Nwosu gets 25 pressures on PFR, which is pretty close to what he did last year, then PFF would probably give him like 60-something. So understand that there's a clear discrepancy in how those two sites are counting pressures. But I think Nwosu gets to 25, and we end up feeling pretty good about him as a player. I don't know if he stays around after this year, but he's got some money to make. He's going to have some money to make after this season. Even if he doesn't match last year's numbers, people are going to watch him play and see that he is a really good all-around edge player. Okay, next one we're going to look at here is I think he's going to be our other starter. He was already starting some games last year. It's Boye Mafe. I'm expecting big things from Mafe in 2023. I think he is probably the top breakout candidate from rookies of last season. I think he's going to make the biggest step up. Like, you have guys like Woolen and Walker who are already really good. They can't get much better than that. You've got guys like Cross and Lucas who I think will get better, but I think Mafe gets way better. He was a guy that I was high on pretty much that whole draft process. I'm not going to back off of it now. I think he's going to be a starter. I have him getting to 50 tackles in 2023, which would be a good amount more than he had last year. Not a ton more. Again, now that we have some of the things going on this defense that should make it at least a little bit better, there are going to be less tackles to go around because hopefully opposing teams don't have the ball as much. So it's not a bad thing at all. Tackles for loss, I gave him 8. He's a guy who plays the run well, so every reason to believe he's going to continue to be a force against the run the way he was last season. Now, I don't think he's an elite, even his potential. I don't think he'll ever be an elite pass rusher, but I think he'll be good, and I think he'll make steps in the right direction this year. I gave him 8 sacks, so that would be 5 more than last year. I don't see Mafe ever getting to like 15 sacks in a season, or maybe not even like 13, but he could get to like 10 or 11, I think. And I think he's going to start moving towards that this year. I think he's going to come in hot with 8, and then I gave him 22 pressures. So that's a nice improvement over last year, and that would make him probably the most notable sophomore breakout on the Seahawks in 2023. So high on Mafe, big expectations for him. So those are your 2 starters at edge. Now we move on to the guys who are coming off the bench. I think the 2 guys we're going to have rotating in the most are pretty obvious here. First is Darrell Taylor, who did some nice things last year, had his moments. Overall, very limited player. I think we all know that this guy, at the end of the day, doesn't bring much to the table, but what he does bring to the table is valuable. He can get pressure, he can get sacks. That's important. Like, he doesn't bring much of anything else, but if you're bringing those 2 things to, that one thing to the table, really, if we're talking about one thing here, you have a place in the NFL. Now, the good news is he's not going to have to play as much this year because of Mafe's improvement. So Taylor can come in off the bench, rotate in on passing downs, and do damage in situations where he doesn't have to really worry about playing the run. So I gave him 23 tackles. He's never going to be a guy who gets a lot of tackles because he is weak against the run. And I gave him 6 tackles for loss, which honestly might be a little bit high. It's roughly in line with what he had last year. I'm going to say that just by the nature of him building experience, he gets a little better against the run, but he's not going to get a lot better. He's never really going to be a good run defender. I think he can get to a point where he's not horrible, but he'll continue to be bad. Sacks, I went with 6.5. I think he loses some of those sacks out to Mafe. I don't think he's going to be getting a ton of opportunities the way that he did last year because we didn't really have anybody else that we felt good about rotating in. This year, he might legitimately lose a decent number of snaps to a guy like a Derek Hall or even an Alton Robinson. Last year, that couldn't happen because we didn't have those guys. I still think he gets to 6.5 and we end up feeling like he made a positive contribution to this team, but I don't think he's going to shake his moniker of being a pretty middling player overall that brings one thing to the table, really. Pressures, I say 15. I think that will continue to be a respectable part of his game, but it'll be the only part of his game, really. And there may be some games this year where he plays very little despite being healthy just because we feel like we can't mess around with his limitations as a player. But overall, I think he will make meaningful contributions. All right, next up we got Derek Hall. I'm not expecting a ton from him as a rookie. We've got 3 capable guys in front of him at the very least. I think Nwosu, Mafe, and Taylor take up most of the snaps, and there's not a lot left for Derek Hall. So I just gave him the old 17 tackles. I gave him 4 tackles for loss, and I gave him 2.5 sacks. Just very similar to what Mafe did last year. The difference being Mafe became the rundown defender because Taylor was so bad at it, and Mafe proved to be pretty good at it. That's not going to happen for Hall because Hall, there's just really no opportunity for him to step forward and say, hey, I'm one of the top 2 edge run defenders on this team. So he's not going to steal those snaps. He's going to pick up whatever's left from these 3 guys. 2.5 sacks, and I went with 7 pressures. He's going to be kind of the Mafe of this season, where he just kind of gets his feet wet this season, and you hope he moves himself forward in 2024 with Nwosu potentially leaving, and who knows what's going on with Darrell Taylor. Okay, we got one guy left here, Alton Robinson. I do think he will play some this year. It sounds like he's making his way back health-wise. But when you take a look at the four guys we got in front of him, there just isn't going to be a lot of opportunity for him. So I gave him 8 tackles. I think he occasionally just kind of gets onto the field. Somebody gets hurt for a game or two. Somebody gets dinged up at the end of a game. It's garbage time. He goes in. I gave him 8 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and 0.5 sacks. So nothing really to write home about. But hey, he's back on the field. He's playing football again. I gave him 1 QB pressure, and that'll probably be the end of his Seahawks career. There just isn't really room for him anymore to play. Unless a lot of people get hurt, it's really hard for him to get on the field. And you total this all up and put it all together, you've got 156 tackles, 29 for loss, 26.5 sacks, and 70 pressures. Not one of the best edge crops in the league, but a good edge crop that should be good enough to get the job done. You combine it with the defensive line, you combine it with the blitzing that we should be doing with guys like Wagner, Bush, Jamal Adams, maybe even Kobe Bryant, and it's not hard to put together how this team gets to 51 sacks. And I say 51 because that would equal out to 3 per game, which that's not exactly the barometer for being an elite pass rush, but it's the barometer for being a quality pass rush. So, totally workable, totally effective, not elite. We don't have that one killer. We don't have that one TJ Watt or Bosa kind of guy, but we do have 3 guys that can get it done. We do have 1 interesting rookie, and that should be good enough for now. Let me know what you guys think. Those are my best guesses. See you guys later. Go Hawks. More predictions coming later.